Welcome to another segment of my YouTube channel. This segment today is interesting one. I mean, all my segments I believe are interesting, but it's taken from a different angle today. We're talking with two young men who was born in the Turks and Caicos Islands, who grew up in the Turks and Caicos Islands, to parents who are from Haiti. And we want to talk with them to understand what it's like, because there are a lot of us, there are a lot of people in the Turks and Caicos Islands, there are a lot of whose parents are not from here, and they feel left out. And I want to share their experiences, what it's like living in a country where both your parents are not from that country. Welcome to our show. Please say your names.
My name is Lawrence St. Ange.
My name is Oshano Pierre.
So you guys were born in the Turks and Caicos Islands many years ago. You grew up, I think you say 5 keys, both of you?
Yes, sir.
What was it like growing up in the Turks and Caicos Islands, where both your parents are not from Turks and Caicos Islands? What was it like growing up? How were you treated?
Well, for the most part, I'd say it was eventful. I say eventful because, being born here, it's education and you have aspirations just continue on with primary school. But even in the process of obtaining that education, there were a few disturbances and even acquiring that education. In the article that I wrote, I mentioned immigration apartheid that took place in these islands in the early 2000s, where myself, I was a victim of not being able to access an education. Although my parents were both legally working here, I was not allowed to go to school because where my parents were from. And so,
Is it where they're from, or is it because of the type of work permit that they have? Because I think back then, on certain work permit categories, children were not endorsed on the work permit, and so the children were not able to go into the classrooms,
right,
into the public classrooms. You could go to private schools, but not the public schools.
not the public, right.
Is it because of that, or is it because of where they're from?
Well, predominantly that policy, who it affected was, the Haitian community. And so, as a result of that, it was mainly Haitians being affected. And so, my parents, I was initially endorsed on their work permit, but the way the policies were implemented, it was in a way where it was almost impossible for me to get back into public education system.
I see.
So obviously a policy wouldn't say, hey, this certain group couldn't get education, but eventually that's how it turned out to be.
Mm-hmm.
Indirectly, that's what the policy did. A certain group were affected largely, and they weren't able to get education.
Right, because most of the people who are doing the domestic work were from Haiti, more or less.
That's correct. That's
right.
correct. So that's why I say
I understand what you're saying now. I understand what you're saying. Okay. And so you were in practice. So you were not in school for a period of time?
Yeah, so I was in school for an entire year. My parents had put me in a school, I think in the second term of when the government would begin the school year for primary schools. And so it was two local people that were just trying to help out. They recognized the market of so many children being born here, Haitian background, getting access to education. So it was at least 200 of us, took us in, and they just taught us what they could. But even then, the education still wasn't sufficient enough for us to advance, because even when I got back, I had to repeat the grade.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so that was like what grade period that was?
That was about K2.
Okay, so
Going to grade 1.
So when you got back, you were able to get into the system?
I was able to get into the system, but I had to
Repeat. How were you able to get into the system if you were declined the year before? Was there a change in government or something like that?
So, a few things I mentioned in my article. So, the United Nations recognized this because of some well-meaning Turks Islanders because they understood that, you know, you can't have kids here 1 year. You can't deport them. Okay? You're not going to deport them because their parents are legal. So they're here. And if you have them here instead of having them uneducated at home, you might as well educate them. So the change in policy, the UK government put some pressure on our government here in Turks and Caicos, and eventually they repealed the policy. And so as a result of that, we were able to go to school.
Okay. I think it was the change in government actually.
A government.
I believe the government had changed. And
There was a change in government as well.
yeah, even the government had changed. And when they changed, I believe they reversed the policy to allow those students to enter the school. Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
It was the change to the Michael Minsick administration, I think.
Probably,
Yeah.
yes, I believe so.
It was during that time because I remember a lot of Haitians, they were supporting at the time when education, Lillian Voice, because you know,
It was during that time it was reversed.
it was during that time, you know, that's people believe that it was because of her or because of that government that the policy was repealed.
Okay.
So mostly because of that, that's why people believe it was repealed.
So were there any private schools around at that time when you were not allowed to go to the public schools? Were there any private schools that your parents were not able to put you in, or
There was
no
private
options?
schools, but couldn't afford it.
Couldn't afford it.
Couldn't afford it, so you're left with the option of, you know, just what I would say, a poor quality school. I'm pretty sure it was not accredited by the Ministry of Education, but I think as a parent, you know, you just want to see a kid learn something,
Of course.
you know. So that's what happened. My sister and I met dozens of kids. You know, they went to these private schools, and you know, it was something.
Right.
You know, it wasn't at the quality enough to allow you to advance, but
You
you
went
know,
to
'cause
school.
everyone had to repeat the grades.
Okay, gotcha. Are you saying something?
I
Were you
guess-
same situation as Lawrence?
That was a great. For me personally, my parents were a bit more fortunate, so I was allowed to go to private school during that period. But after it got reversed, I went to Inikapron.
Okay. Both of you went to the same school?
Yeah, so one thing
Same
is
school. And how did you feel? Did you feel rejected because you were born in the country? You felt that we rejected you? That we as Turks and Caicos Islanders rejected you? I mean, of course you was young at that time, but did that create any bitterness in you towards the country?
No, not really. I feel like afterwards, me looking back on it now, I feel a lot privileged because there's a lot of people in that situation who went back to Haiti who never came back. Me now, I look at it as motivation because now that I have the opportunity to actually learn, I'm going to push myself more and more and more because I know that that opportunity wasn't there so long ago, and there's a lot of people who are in my shoes who didn't get the chance to actually come back and do it. So each time we always push, and try to be on the road probably every month, I think.
Lawrence, do you have any point to add to that?
Yeah, for me, I'll be honest, it created a lot of bitterness,
You did?
a lot of resentment for those that were responsible or those that endorsed and supported the policy. Because my parents made me aware of why this was happening. And I remember my sister and I crying because we couldn't go to school. You know, and even I remember my father himself, he went to one of the ministers at the time, and he begged for his children to go to school. You know, there's a case that my father was illegal at the time, you know.
He was what?
If he was illegal.
Oh, but he wasn't.
But he wasn't, you know. I understand the government can make provisions for illegals, because it's not accounted for. My father was legal, but my parents were legal, working, yeah.
And you were endorsed on the work permit?
Well, I was taken off because of the policy.
Oh, okay.
I was before.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was taken off because of policy. And so my father begged, and the person told my dad it's just too bad.
Wow.
So are you still bitter, or are you over that bitterness now?
I'm not over it.
You're not over it?
No, I'm getting better at forgiving because I do believe that Christ wants us to forgive. And if I'm to embody Christ, I have to know how to forgive people, even when they don't apologize.
Right.
So
Do you understand why the government made that decision at that time, or do you understand from their point of view why they made that decision?
honestly, I haven't been given an explanation from anyone from the government at the time. So I can only go off of my experience.
And what your parents told
My
you?
parents told me and the experience of others. I would appreciate if someone came to me at the time and gave me some kind of rationale for that decision to better understand what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
Just to even help me with my healing process, because it did hurt. It got a deep wound inside of me,
Wow.
and I'm still healing from it.
Right.
So if there's any way anyone can come and speak to me about it, sit me down and say, hey, the reason why this past season acted was because of X, Y, and Z. It's just gonna make me even more compassionate, understanding,
Right.
and probably speed up my forgiving process.
Right. Well, I don't remember, why it happened, or I remember when it happened, but I believe one of the reasons the government passed that law because it was becoming a burden on the government. Because what happened, Lawrence, is that the way the system was working is that anyone was coming in and the children were going to public school. And so the government had to, recruit teachers. They had to pay the teachers, and the person's on work permit. The work permit at that time, the fee was very low for the domestic workers. And I believe they had said that the children should pay, I think, $400, I remember. And that wasn't happening. And so it was a burden on the government. And they felt the policy at that time was encouraging too many people to send their children into the public school. It's going to cost them a lot of money. It does cost a lot of money. In fact, now we're building a fourth primary school on the island of Providenciales because the school's already overcrowded. And so that's my understanding is one of the reasons why they did that. That you're only paying a work permit. I think work permit is probably $500 a year, whatever. And children are coming in, going to the public school for free, and it was a burden on them. And so and locals couldn't get their children to the school, and so they made the decision that domestic workers, the work permit will not be endorsed. That's my understanding. I may be wrong, but that's my understanding. So the government's trying to look out for the finances and the protection of their own people as well.
Right.
So, but I understand, it could be frustrating for you, So.
Yeah, because I think even at the time, being born here, I don't always believe in birthright citizenship. It's not always good for the economy, but I do believe that me being born here, should have counted for something at the time,
Right.
and I should have been adopted as their own people.
Okay.
But it wasn't even up to me. They looked past me, looked at my parents,
Right.
and that made
More bitterness.
that too. But it basically, they based their decision off of my parents. Although they were working here legally, they're employed. My father had been here for over 15 years.
Right. At that time.
At that time, yes. Over 15 years. My mom as well, close to that time. So it's not like they were
Newcomers.
newcomers. They were here for a pretty long time.
So Lawrence, with our law though, even though you're born here, and of course the United States, a lot of us had our children in the United States of America.
For sure.
And as soon as that child is born, that child is a U.S. citizen.
Automatically.
Now in the Turks and Caicos Islands, it's not like that.
Right.
I'm quite sure because you wrote a very good article. I think maybe 3 parts, your article you wrote.
3 parts.
We'll talk about that later. And in our law in the Turks and Caicos Islands, the same thing in the Bahamas. Even though you were born in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and if both of your parents are not from the Turks and Caicos Islands, you do not get Turks and Caicos status. I think when you reach 18, I believe, you have a choice. But up to age 18, you're not a Turks and Caicos Islander status, even though you're born in the country.
Right.
Now, other countries that mentioned the United States, you are a citizen automatically, but that's not the case. And now, one of your parents was a Turks and Caicos Islander, then you could get that status.
Right.
But because both of your parents, that is the law, and the law still is the same. both your parents, then you will be able to get that status. So even though you're born here, at that time there's not looking at that either because you are not considered Turks and Caicos Islander.
Right.
Yeah. But do you consider yourself a Turks and Caicos Islander? What do you consider yourself?
Well, I'd love to be a Turks. I love to be able to call myself Turks Islander. I have conversation with my friends at university. I say I'm a Turks and Caicos Islander. But am I actually a Turks and Caicos Islander? No.
Why not?
Because I don't have the documents to say that I'm a Turks and Caicos Islander. I'm a British overseas territory citizen. I'm also a British citizen as well. But the connections that I would need to this territory to be able to acquire T-side status, I didn't have at the time I was born. However, there's a policy now. There's legislation that allows me to become one, but that's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
With the implementation of that policy.
Right. What about you? Do you consider, even though legally you're not a Turks and Caicos Islander by law, because both your parents are not from Turks and Caicos? I know people who have lived there most of their life who are not from Turks and Caicos, who consider themselves Turks and Caicos Islander because they've lived all their life. They've assimilated into the community. Mm-hmm. Do you consider, they don't have a paper to say they're Turks and Caicos Islander, but because they lived there most of their life, they consider this home. Mm-hmm. And so they call themselves Turks and Caicos Islander. Do you consider yourself?
100%.
That's awesome.
This is my country. I don't know nowhere else. Legally, I do have belonging status, so I am a Turks and Caicos Islander.
So you have the belonging status?
Yes.
So why Lawrence? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I have the belonging status. And I need no Turks and Caicos Islands. I don't know Haiti. I don't know nowhere else. Turks is my home. Caicos is my home. And I think that's all I need for me, my personal fulfillment, to say that I'm a Turks and Caicos Islander.
And you say that?
I say that bold, clearly.
But Turks Islanders don't call you Turks Islander, right?
Some of them, but that's their opinion.
But in your heart,
I know
you are a Turks and Caicos Islander. That's great. That is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, Lawrence, he said he got his status. He's you saying that you need your document, more or less, to say you're Turks Islander. Now,
well,
so I don't think you really need that to say you're Turks Islander.
Well, I mean that's an argument in itself,
right?
So the thing is, right? Mm-hmm. The reason why I mentioned the document is because once you have that document, the country itself recognizes you as their own.
Gotcha.
Here's why I say that. It's because you have access to so many resources.
Benefits
to help you succeed. Why? Because the country recognizes you as their own once you have a document. And if you don't have a card or a certificate that says you're a Turks and Caicos Islander, then your growth at some point plateaus. So you can't have access to scholarships, certain class of business licenses you can get. So if you have some business venture, it'd be very difficult for you to attain that on your own and make it your own. To go through the system, through education, it'll be very difficult for you to get a grant to further education. So that's why I say, you can't vote without it. So although the system would have educated you on the government's, the history of it, you still won't be able to participate in the electoral process to dictate or to have a say in who represents a country. I think that's a big part of being a citizen in the country, is having a say in where the country goes and the direction that it takes.
Absolutely. But with the 2015 immigration law, mm-hmm. I personally think it's a very lenient law. I think it allows many different people to obtain citizenship. Mm-hmm. And I think you have been here since birth, you're born here. I'm quite sure the law say, more than 10 years, I think you could apply for citizenship to Turks and Caicos Islands. They have different ways in which you become a citizen. And so with the 2015 law, you can apply to become a citizen of the Turks and Caicos Islands. If you read the law.
Yeah, you can apply.
Sure, I can.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the process of gathering the documents
mm-hmm.
to apply, and even that has its challenges because there's a few things that you have to get.
Right.
But even within the law, they're asking me for $5,000 after it gets approved, and so
there's a fee.
It's a fee.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is that, the law itself is not catered specifically for people like me in terms of the ease of access to obtaining the status. So $5,000 is a big barrier. It may not be for some people, but for me it is a big barrier considering that I'm a student.
I understand.
So if I have $5,000 right now, it'll be very hard for me to weigh the opportunity costs of putting that into my board for the year.
Right.
And
I understand what you're saying. I mean, especially. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was saying that it would, for right now, getting through university is the priority.
I understand that. Yeah, the $5,000, especially being a student,
Right.
it'll be a difficult choice. Do I use the $5,000 now towards the citizenship, or do I use the $5,000 towards the university?
Right.
Now, you mentioned earlier that there are a lot of benefits of being a citizen,
For sure.
and so
Right.
obviously, you have to weigh the pros and cons of the 5,000. But it's not that much. The 5,000 overall is not that much. But being a student, it is a lot, which I understand.
But do you believe that it's right for him, who's been here 23 years all your life,
Yeah,
24 years, and he has to pay $5,000 just for a piece of paper, well, a card to say that you're a Turks and Caicos Islander? Because to him, in my opinion, how I feel in his shoes is that I've been here all my life. I grew up with other kids who are TIs on paper as well. We've been to school, we played basketball together, everything together, and the time reaches, time for you to apply for a business license, time to do this, time to apply for a scholarship. Some of them you even did better than them in school, but because of your background and where your parents are, do you not feel like it discriminates against them a bit?
Before I answer that question, you said you are a citizen. Did you
Yeah.
pay for your citizenship?
No.
You didn't pay for your citizenship?
The route I got it from is that my mom is a belonger.
Got it. But your mom paid for hers.
Yes.
Are your parents a belonger now?
They're not belongers. They have naturalized here, so they have Turkish passports.
Okay,
So that's they went through PRC route, naturalization route.
I
That's
understand.
how they acquired them.
I understand. So you didn't have to pay because your mom got a belongership status. Now, to answer your question, I think it's fair. Now, to me, my personal opinion, I believe that you are Turks and Caicos Islander. I believe you're born here, you grew up here. It appears you assimilate. You're very good friends with my daughter. I believe you assimilate in the community. Some people do not assimilate as part of Turks and Caicos. But the law is the law. The law says that's the law. And it's not just against the Haitian community. That's the law that they put in place. So I believe your parents should have applied for the belongership status like what your parents did, and it made it be easier for you. So I can't say the law discriminates. I mean, because that's the law that was put in place, and there has to be a fee. Now, this is a big issue in our country, where we have a lot of people who have migrated to the country, who have lived all their life, and they want to know where do they fit in. Who are they? Are they Turks and Caicos Islanders? That's why I was very proud when I heard you say that. You are Turks and Caicos Islander. There's some that, we have a big issue in this country. There's some that are, who do not say they're Turks and Caicos Islanders. You know what I mean? Some of them badmouth the Turks and Caicos Islands, even though they've lived there all their life. And so we have a big issue. But until the law changes, that is the law. I think it's unfair to a certain extent because you live all your life, but unfortunately, that is the law of the country.
Yeah, for sure. And your reasons are valid. It is the law.
Right.
But like a lot of laws, there can be amendments.
Yes.
So the law, nothing's wrong with the law, and I don't know, I can't remember who exactly passed the bill, but the fact that the bill is there is a stepping stone.
I think it was passed in 2015. I think it was the Honorable
Rufus,
Donahue Gardner was the minister at that time.
Right,
I believe.
Right,
Yeah.
at the time. So it'll be under his leadership in the Ministry of Immigration.
So I can see why you're bitter as well, because here you have to pay $5,000. You've been all your life, and you have to pay.
Right.
Do you know why your parents never applied for Be longer?
They applied years ago, to speaking maybe 2006, 2007, around those times. But if you look at the law at the time, it was you. It was almost like a hand-picked basis. You know?
Really?
So the law itself was that you had to either make a social or economic contribution to the country. This was before
Before the new,
the 2015 legislation.
Got it.
That's right. And so, from my understanding, is that okay? You either bought a home here, you either built something here, something substantial, to be able to have
to show
access to it.
some sort of commitment.
Right. So, but I know other people that have acquired it through just the goodwill that they've acquired through the community in their time. Yeah, that's probably how your parents would have.
How did your parents,
My parents,
able to get it? Because
they bought a few properties here, so they invested all the money that they worked here. So I think that counted for it when they went to apply for their homes.
okay,
Yeah.
right. Okay, that makes sense then, because you know there was a criteria. I think there's still a criteria for. I mean, I think that's one of the options. You know.
Yeah.
So, right.
So yeah, that's you know, and then I sometimes I don't even look at myself. My parents, my father moved here in 1989.
Right.
You know, substantial amount of time here, more than half his life been living here, but even then he's still not able to really
Fit in.
fit in. You know, it's like, you know, my father, he always preached to me about being away in my country. We always had a TV on WIB4, and as I got older, he switched to CNN, just to ensure that my sister and I were always politically, commercially, and globally aware. And so when I got,
He's a great father. Yeah.
yeah, he's a smart man.
Mhm.
He worked very hard. And even, you know, I got to a point where, you know, I was like, Dad, you know, I'm excited to vote. Because I remember at the point I had all the ministers, I had their pictures in my room. Because I was so proud of, you know, just having that pride in my country.
Right.
So I got to the voting age, and I was like, Dad, you know, I'm excited to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Right.
said, you know, sit down. And have a word with
Time
me,
for
you
that
know.
talk.
Let's have that talk, you know.
Okay.
This is your situation.
So at that time, you didn't realize you were not a citizen.
No, I didn't realize at the time.
I feel like only after you leave high school you realize like, wow, if I don't have this little card here, things start going downhill from there. Because I can,
The status card.
yeah, I can use my friends for example, and me and Lawrence for example. Okay, Lawrence was privileged enough that he got the Turks and Caicos Islanders passport, and he had funds to make it off to school. Me and him as well, but
As overseas territory
as
passport,
well,
yeah.
yeah.
Not the Turks and Caicos Island one.
Well, Turks and Caicos passport. It says Turks and Caicos.
Okay.
But inside of it says overseas territory.
Okay.
Okay, so the community that we come from, you could say 100 guys,
Yeah, 100 to 150.
150 guys, and mostly immigrant, children of immigrants. We're the only two to make it and go off to school. And if you look at it, the underlying issues for the other 140 is that I have issues with my status, or issues here. I can't get a passport, I can't get my status card. Every one of them, you go to them, you really speak to them, you find out that they're basically stateless.
But even though they've been here for 10 years or more, they could still get the British
30 years.
overseas citizen territory. They could get that status. They've been here for 10 years or more.
They can.
They can.
But the process itself is not that simple.
It's not?
No, because I know a guy, you know, yeah.
Mm.
So he graduated at 16, stayed home for 3 years. Couldn't work, couldn't do anything because his application was caught up in Grand Turk.
Yeah, that is another issue.
So it's like, okay, no problem. Like, I do appreciate the fact that my parents were able to move here, you know, have an opportunity to work, and I'm able to, you know, live a decent life because I do understand I'm privileged than a lot of people in this world, you know.
Right.
And so even, you know, after you graduate, there's still a process of getting naturalization, and
Mm.
I have no friend that I've had to pay I think it's, how much is the naturalization, like $750?
I sure own the price.
$750.
I think so, around that. They've had to, I think it's 1,500 actually.
I sure own the price.
Right.
So-
But they've had to pay it 3-4 times because the application just got lost somewhere. They just couldn't.
Went missing.
But they didn't have a receipt.
Well, they would have had a receipt, but then even during that, it just something happened in the process where they just had to keep paying.
Right.
And
Unless the fee is non-refundable, and they have to keep paying
I'm
them.
not sure.
Yeah.
Sure, but
It's not to say that they had to pay the 1,500 so many times, but it could have been because of the agencies
That they
they had to
use.
deal with.
yeah.
So yeah, probably wasn't because of the fee, because like you said, they would have probably got a receipt as well to prove that they paid for it. But the agency fees and gathering, police records expiring
I
time
know.
after time,
Yeah, that's
You
sad.
know.
That's sad.
just have to
Yeah.
you have to have a lot of resilience.
Yeah, you're right.
But again, touching on that, like back to the guys we were speaking about. A lot of the times, even for myself, like when I went to apply for my belonger status, and being that my mom already had a belonger status, there's not a clear route. Like you really think it's just we thought it was
Filling out
just
the form.
fill out the form, boy, up and down for almost a year to get it. And these guys, they're here. They've been trying 3 years, go to this person, go to this justice of peace, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until they reach a point where I give up on this.
Yeah.
Then it's just causing more and more issues, because you look at it, these guys are at home. I don't have no status, so I can't work. What do I do next?
Now you mentioned earlier stateless. Are they really stateless though? Because even though they may not have the Turks and Caicos status, can't they just take the status of their parents? Can you get a Haitian passport? They're not really stateless, are they?
It depends. Depends, because I don't think it's that easy to get a Haitian passport.
So really, if Haitian immigrants leave Haiti and have their children outside of Haiti, their children are not considered citizens of Haiti?
I'm not entirely sure.
You're not sure?
I'm not entirely sure, but I have heard of there being some strict legislation to avoid those kids being born in other countries to come back there and acquire citizenship. I'm not entirely sure what the law. I haven't researched.
So Haiti's doing the same thing that we're trying to do with Turks and Caicos. We're trying to protect
Right.
the
Indigenous
citizens
people.
of the Turks and Caicos, the locals. They're doing basically the same thing. So, do you have a lot of friends who are Turks and Caicos Islanders, or mostly your friends of immigrants?
Oof.
You have both?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a mixture.
And how do they treat you? Do they treat you differently because your parents are from Haiti?
No.
I mean, we have small jokes, like the small little Haitian jokes and stuff like that. We don't really take it personally, because, we've grown up with those jokes being said. But I feel like you've known this person all your life, like it's just love. It's not the only time you really realize it is like you come to school and you realize, boy, we different. That's when it really hits you, like,
Why you say you're different?
because when I came to school, like my belonging status wasn't theirs yet. I couldn't apply for a scholarship. That's the first thing. I couldn't start a business. Some of my friends, easy, and I know, like during high school, I did better than this guy. I'm not saying that to brag, but I know that I outworked them.
Outwork the locals?
I can say that. A few of them, not all of them, but the people that I know personally, I know that full on well, I outwork these people.
Right. But then the locals, though, that's the benefit of being a citizen. There's certain
Yes.
privileges
Right.
and benefits of being a citizen. And I know that, I can understand, being bitter, but bear in mind, though, like in any country, when a work permit is issued, that work permit is not supposed to be permanent. The work permit is supposed to be for a temporary period of time, say like 2 years.
Other people.
But our governments on both sides, they're being very lenient. They're being very generous. They allow work permits to continue to renew and renew and renew. And as a result, you're here for many years. Really and truly, after 2 years,
you should be going.
You shouldn't even be in the Turks and Caicos Islands. You're working this for 2 years. But companies, they want to have this continuity process, and so they apply for renewal of the workment of their employees, and so they continue to be in the country. So I want Lawrence to think about it in that point of view too, And I have a friend, he's from Scotland, and his son went to Canada on a work permit for 2 years. His son wanted to stay in Canada beyond the 2 years, but the Canadian government told him, your work permit is only for 2 years, that's it. So when you think about that too, the governments have been able to renew your parents' work permit for years and years and years, and allow them to stay into the country, where they now have an opportunity to apply for belongership status. So that's something good came out of that as well.
Something, good point. Really good point. I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Also, at the time, when my parents were here, at the time that we also needed a lot of labels.
Yeah.
Also,
Yes.
So there was reasons for my parents to be here, and we can understand that coming from Haiti,
Right.
you wouldn't be in the most high-paid job, minimum wage.
Right.
And so the government, the business owners benefited from the cheap labor.
Of course, everybody benefited. Everybody benefited. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
there was incentives for the government to keep my parents here for as long as they did, up until a certain point where they had the freedom
Right.
to permanently reside here.
Right.
But
They can. They didn't have to. The government could have just say, you stay for 2 years, we bring somebody else in.
okay.
You stay for another 2 years. They didn't have to, but they,
That-
Do you-
they
do you not think
they didn't have to. But they allow people to continue to stay up beyond the time, because you can easily replace people. But it's easier if people just continue, and it'll be easier for everyone
Right.
if
I
people
feel
remain.
I feel like they wanted to grow the population a bit, because I think during those years the population was really small here in Turks. And,
Population's still small.
It's still
We
small.
forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's still small.
it helped the country grow a bit because the spending power was here.
It definitely helped the country because we needed as the country, grew, we needed people to work in the different industries, and so the country continued to grow. It needed more jobs to create it. We didn't have enough locals to fill those jobs, so we had to, import, laborers.
For sure.
I feel like now it's really becoming, well, not now, but over the past few years, because during that period, was there a lot of educated locals, trained locals enough to really fit the demand that was growing?
I think we had enough people. I think we had trained locals. We had trained, educated people. But the way our country was growing, there was never enough locals, whether they was educated or not. It's just that our country is growing faster than the rate that we were having children. And so we always, for years now, we always had to import laborers because the country is growing. And yes, we had educated locals. Some of them stayed in the country, some of them left the country. We have a lot of educated people now, a lot of them have left the country. It's just that the country is growing at a faster rate than what we are growing as locals. So what do you think we need to do for us to come together as residents and citizens of the country, rather than us versus you, us versus them? How can we come together?
I feel like when there's a common goal, a common plan, then everyone will come together. I feel like the country doesn't know really what they want.
I see.
So if we know 100% what we want in the future, we can say, okay, we're gonna come together. This is what has to stop. This is what can continue. And in terms of like immigration, I feel like in Turks, the families weren't so many. Like you had the Cox, the Smith, the Ridleys, the indigenous family. But at one point, I feel like a lot of people are related to each other in Turks.
We are.
So,
We are.
so with the foreign people coming in, I think, how do I put this in a proper way? With the foreign people coming in, a lot of TI men, TI women, they got in relationships with each other, and That's why there's a lot of Haitian TIs, TI Haitians. So basically, now Haitian TIs are related to TIs, Haitian Dominicans related to TIs. You understand what I'm saying? So we're all one big family if you look at it, because I'm related to Miziks, Rigbys, Cox, all from my Haitian side of the family, being my mother. But how do we really see the common goal, like all of us coming together to say, this is what we want for our country, this is how we're gonna grow.
Yeah.
This year we're gonna stop importing labor, we have to train our people, because now I feel like we're nearly there with the amount of people we have to fit these places.
Mhm.
So how do we cap this off?
Right.
I think again, like I mentioned in my article as well.
Yeah.
It begins with policy. You know,
The policy.
yeah,
Mhm.
it begins with policies. You know, if you, because people feed off of the policies that you have. So if you have a policy that unifies the people, the country, they embody the policy. If you have a policy that's very divisive, the country becomes divisive.
Yeah.
And so, one thing I mentioned in my article is inclusionary legislation. So, legislation that allows people to feel included, accepted, welcome in society.
Okay, how would that tell? What do you envision that legislation should be when you should be inclusive? Explain more. What sort of legislation that? How would it work? And what sort of wording?
So, the legislation is the Turks and Caicos Islands statute can be a part of that legislation. It can be a part of it. The UK has an Equality Act that I'm pretty sure we can siphon off of to make people feel more inclusive, not just immigrants. It could be people of older age. It could be disabled people as well. But that's a policy that just makes people feel welcome in every environment.
So
A
you
policy
don't.
that should be, adopted, to be required to be adopted by businesses, because we can't argue that, a lot of businesses, they tend to stick to a certain group, whether it's Asian, Turks Islanders. It's something that we don't like to say, but it does happen.
It happens, and I'm not sure. I agree with you. It happens. I'm not even sure a policy would change that, because people tend to stick with people that they are comfortable with,
For sure.
and people who are more or less of the same background.
For sure.
But I hear what you're saying. I believe we should have an Equality Act. I think that, especially in terms of pay, there's a huge discrepancy.
Right.
But I believe that if people who come here and who are born here and assimilate as part of the country, I don't even think a policy should matter. I think if you have considered the Turks and Caicos Islands your home, you celebrate our culture, you do the things we do, you assimilate, you have your friends, then you're part of us. But if you are going to separate yourself into your own little circle, then you will yourself have eliminated yourself as well. And even though we may have a policy to include everybody. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand. So that's, for the most part of my life, that's where I've been,
Right.
A lot of my friends are Turks Islanders, but I've never said I have a friend that discriminated against me because I have a Haitian background.
Well, that's awesome of you.
That's never happened.
That's
However,
great.
I have had experiences
Mm-hmm.
where I felt as though from the minute someone sees my last name, I'm at a disadvantage.
I got it. I can understand.
So as a result of that, that's why a lot of us, we feel as if we're outsiders.
You feel
because
outsiders.
the system itself makes us feel that way.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. I mean, even though I don't know, it's like, it's something about human beings. It's like when one group is in a better position than someone else, people always
Dislike them.
feel superior to others. I don't know why. I mean, I think of Delano. His mom, I think, is Asian,
I believe so.
and his dad is Turks Island.
I believe so.
Delano is treated good because he's an athlete. But maybe if Delano was an athlete, we might not have treated him that way. I don't know. But that's just how we are as humans, and it's wrong to treat people, differently because of who they are. and who their parents are, you know. But the problem is in Turks and Caicos is that we feel threatened. We feel threatened by the Haitian community. We feel threatened because there are only a few Turks and Caicos Islands in the country. We have a lot of Haitians who are coming here, whether they come legally or illegally, by both. And so we are outnumbered. And so we feel threatened. And so sometimes governments put policies and laws in place to protect their people. Because eventually, down the road, there'll be enough Haitians in this country to basically form a government. And so people, the Turks and Caicos Islanders, they feel threatened by that. And so that's why sometimes the process is the way the process is. They're trying to protect their local people. Because there are some who don't think much of Turks and Caicos. There's some that do, and there's some that don't. There's some that are planning, once they become in power, to treat us, Turks and Caicos Islands, different as well. I don't know if you're aware of that, but there are some.
Drexel. Would you still, like, by the time they reach to that point to actually go in government, would these people still be classed as Haitian? Because to me, when that time reached, they'll be full-on Turks and Caicos Islanders, because by that time, they'd at least be here for 30, 40 years by that time before they get themselves straight. I don't think it's like the first generation Haitians that are going to actually go and run. They're going to be the child of immigrants who've gone to school here, worked here, grew up here, had kids here, lived here. I don't think they'll hold that resentment against Turks and Caicos Islanders. I feel like by the time they reach, if they actually want to run for government, they'd full on love their country. That's how I see it,
Right.
personally speaking.
Right.
And
Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the first place we go wrong is, if someone of Haitian descent becomes the leader's country someday, is for us to see that person as a Haitian. I think that's where we go wrong.
Yeah.
For them to have gotten to that place, to have had to be a Turks and Caicos Islander. So I feel as if the more we consider people's backgrounds, the more we're going to feel threatened, because the population can only grow.
Yes.
So if it grows and you're still not allowing people to feel or legislatively be Turks Islanders, the number's going to grow, and it's going to be an even bigger problem for other generations. So if we can, allow these people to assimilate legislatively, then I feel like we are preventing a bigger problem from occurring in the future.
Really?
So if you assimilate them from now, make them feel that the Turks is from now,
Welcome.
and welcome, we can have a very good country with more Turks Islanders.
Right.
So if we all can see us as Turks and Caicos Islanders and not consider their
Haitians.
background, then it eliminates the problem.
Yeah. And to tell you the truth, at one point, all of us, had somehow, there's no, in Turks and Caicos, we had people that, for years, whose parents were not from Turks and Caicos. For years, I think the Louis, I think if you really do research, they probably came from Jamaica. So we have people that came from different countries who are, Turks and Caicos Islanders now. So maybe it will change. I mean, I do not know. I tell you one thing, if Haiti was a rich country, the attitude towards Haiti might be different. But because Haiti is poor, I believe that's part of the reason. There are many other reasons.
Yeah, for sure.
We have people coming to the country. It's frustrating to us as locals, I'll be honest with you.
Fear to us as well.
They're coming here. We have all these boats coming every week, almost every week. At one point, we have people coming here building illegal shacks on property that don't belong to them. So it's frustrating to the average person, right?
For sure.
They get upset, and that's part of the problem that we face. And to a point now, you have to consider: do we put a quota on how many work permits do we have, per country? Because it reached a level people are frustrated.
Right.
You go through Fire Keys, go through Blue Hills. You saw these shacks, and most of the shacks are built by people from Haiti.
Yeah. a lot of
And
people,
so,
for sure,
you know,
wouldn't dispute that.
yeah.
Touching on that,
Mhm.
us as Christians and as child of Haitian immigrants, we believe in following the laws of the land.
Mhm.
So the legalized Haitians are not the one doing this.
So they are illegals.
They're illegals. That's from what I've seen. They're illegals. And we don't condone it. We completely don't condone it.
Mhm.
And I feel like the government can do a better job at protecting the crown land and implementing policies
Mhm.
that get stuff done snap in terms of squatting and illegal migration.
Right.
It's not the legalized Haitians that
It's
are-
promoting it.
No,
They're not promoting. We're not encouraging
because
them.
no,
We
Not at
say
all.
we. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Mhm.
we don't condone it
Yeah.
because it makes us look bad,
Mhm.
and also it makes things harder for us.
Yeah.
We're not being
It
selfish,
does.
but
It does make things harder for you.
For sure.
we're not being selfish, but my parents have worked really hard to acquire what they've acquired.
Right.
Your parents as well.
Right.
So why should we allow people that don't really care? Because I don't think they've really suffered like went through it, went through the struggle of moving here, getting paid very little bit during that time. A domestic worker, not saying legally, but wouldn't make more than $100 a week.
You mean many years ago?
Many years ago, would they make $50 a week? So imagine staying here through all that time, raising kids, sending them to school, really paying the cost of being a member of society here.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah. But a lot of us, we didn't even know that. For some of us, we think it's being promoted by, the legal Haitians. We believe that it's being promoted and it's being encouraged for them to come here on the legal boats, to build their shacks, and that's why we have a lot of this animosity between the Haitians and the Turks and Caicos Islanders. Yeah, and so that's why we fear if we get a Haitian leader, they'll encourage more of this. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that though, because we're both against illegal immigration.
Right.
We don't want it. When I hear a boat comes, I feel threatened.
Right. Okay.
Because we can't argue that
It's a risk to our safety.
it's a risk to our safety.
Well, and I'm quite sure with our law, even with work permits, I'm quite sure. For example, when we bring Filipinos in, we have to show housing arrangements, and I'm quite sure that's not just for Filipinos. There should be a plan in place whenever someone comes to the country on a work permit. You should know where they're going to be, where they're going to be staying. But I do believe that we need to build some housing structures, whether it's condo style, and because it's going to be a big problem when we get rid of the illegal shacks, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
So we should have some buildings in place where people could go once we get rid of those illegal shacks.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Well, our time is running up. Any closing remarks you want to make about living in the Turks and Caicos Islands as children of immigrants? And what do you think we could do to make lives better for those in the future?
Well, for me, I would say that I've had a really good time in Turks and Caicos. I'm grateful for the opportunity that Turkey has given my parents to be able to flee the dire conditions in Haiti, to be able to come here, have children here, called Turks and Caicos Islanders. I do believe that there's an imminent need for our leaders to consider inclusive policies to make those that were born here or those that have gotten here at a very young age, grown up here, went through the systems, to feel more welcome. Because I do believe that it is us, coupled with existing Turks and Caicos Islanders, that are going to propel this country to be in one of the best places in the world.
And for me, I'd like to say I've loved my experience here, growing up with immigrant parents. And touching on what Lauren said, I think that Turks and Caicos Islanders, not just the government, because we all can create change some way, somehow. Look into the current issues with the immigrants, because you have kids coming out of school who are valedictorians, top students, who don't know nowhere else. Turks is their home. They believe they're Turks and Caicos Islanders, but they can't get no status and can't progress. These people that can't do, they plateaued at that point, who can't improve themselves, is really putting the country behind, because they could have earned so much more if you gave them the chance to educate themselves, come back here, invest, and that could have grown the economy even more, making the Turks and Caicos Islands richer.
Well, I want to thank both of you gentlemen for coming on the show and being very frank and open about, living in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and your experiences. You've had positive and negative. I see Lawrence, your concern, about not feeling welcome, even though you're born here. This is a big issue. It's a big issue that we're going to face in the future, because a lot of immigrants are having their children in the Turks and Caicos Islands. What do we call those children? And what's going to happen to those children? And for us as Turks and Caicos Islanders, we see that as a threat as well, as I mentioned earlier. And we must come to a point where we must draw the line and accept each other. Because you're not going to go anywhere. Once you complete your education, you're going to come right here. This is home for you. So we have to draw a line. But at the same time, we must be able to balance what we have in the Turks and Caicos Islands, because it's getting out of hand. We must be able to appreciate and appreciate each other, respect each other's laws. And more importantly, I believe that we must assimilate and we come together as one. And thank you again for being on the show. And I hope this is a great lesson and eye-opener for many of us. Thanks again.